But it is good to be able to have you back, and we're going to start our third session right now. Then we're going to have a short Q&A time, and then go ahead and have our lunch break. If you are watching online and you're watching live, during our Q&A time, we are going to have a iPad open so that hopefully we can identify your questions as well. I do want to say we have a Q&A time before lunch. It's a shorter time, and then we'll be having a little bit of a longer time after lunch, because we found oftentimes that just being able to, not just for us to answer questions, but for you to give testimonies or some things that you have learned as well, it's really great to be able to have that interaction. So we have that built into the conference. That'll be coming up in just a few moments. But if you want to turn into your booklet to what does inclusion really look like, what does inclusion really look like? And this is where we get to the nuts and bolts of what we're about to do, not just at this session, but our first session back from lunch as well. Because all well and good to talk about the philosophy, isn't it? I think we have to lay down a biblical groundwork for what we're doing. We want to know why we're doing what we're doing. We want to know why the Bible commands us to do what we're doing. But I will say, you can know all the philosophy of special needs ministry that you want, but when a kid is screaming in your face at 11:45 on Sunday, you better know more than philosophy. You better know some of the nuts and bolts, right, of what you need to do to be able to handle and to help that young person. Not just to handle them, but also to help them as well. And when I say that Dianne is really the heart of what we do here with the FIT Conference and all of our books, this is really what I'm talking about, because while I'm knee-deep during the week making sure that I'm serving healthy, nutritious meals as far as biblical sermons to preach, she's spending a lot of time as well in the special needs world, making sure that not only does she have her lesson prepared, but how is the lesson going to be able to be adapted for all of the different special needs in the class as well. And I'll be honest with you, it's a lot of work. And like I said before, it doesn't just happen on Saturday night. It doesn't just happen on Sunday morning. I would encourage you, and I'll just say this for free, this is mostly her session, but I'm holding the microphone right now. So I will say this. Your pastor spends time on his messages before Saturday night on a typical basis. That's the way it works, because the old saying's true, Sunday's always coming. You know what happens on Monday? Another Sunday's coming. And so by the next Monday, I'm already trying to know, where's the next place I'm going to be? What's going on? I'm already trying to plan ahead about that. If you're just thinking about your lesson, and this goes for special needs ministry, this goes for any children's ministry. If you're just thinking on Saturday, and what did that book say I was going to be doing on Sunday? You're doing it wrong. And that's not me saying I think you're doing it wrong. I'm just going to say this emphatically. You are doing it wrong. You don't want your pastor to treat the pulpit like that on Sunday. And the parents of your church should expect that you don't treat the classroom like that on Sunday. And especially with what we're talking about right now, with the fact that there's adaptations that need to be made, inclusion that has to be considered, you can't do that at the last minute. That's not fair to yourself nor to that child. And so how do we make that happen? Well, I'm as interested as you are, so I'm going to sit off to the side. I told you, I'm out here at 11 o'clock. I'm not back there, all right? And so I'm going to let Dianne go ahead and take over here for this lesson as we look at what does inclusion really look like.
Okay. I'm nervous about this. I have to remember I can't walk over too far. It'll make a loud noise. So this really ties in with where we left off for those of you that were in here at the last session. This is the heart, right? This is where we need to have the heart for the work that's going to be required of us, because if you don't have the heart, it can be overwhelming. I will add to what my husband said about being prepared before Saturday. In the last section, I talked about seeing the need, and not just visually, like I see that kid, but seeing the need, like this is the problem or this is the area that I'm lacking. You can't figure all of that out on Saturday. And you can't even figure all of that out on your own. You have to pray on it. You have to pray and ask the Lord to help you. We prayed over something that we did for one of our little girls, who my husband mentioned is nonverbal. And it burdened me that there were aspects of our class that she couldn't be involved in. I don't have wisdom for that. I don't even have experience for that, because I don't have a nonverbal child. So I have to pray on that, and I have to take time to pray on that. I can't just Saturday be like, okay, this is what I'm doing. It's not going to work. So you have to put in the time. And I understand that I'm married to a pastor, so this is my life, and that you're maybe a volunteer and you have a regular full-time job. And I'm not trying to diminish that or the other callings that you have on your life. But this is so important that we have to carve out time for it. And the beautiful thing about it is once you get systems in place, it does go fairly quickly. So in the first session, when we were talking about what does inclusion mean, there was an outline given. And what was that phrase? I don't have the notes in front of me. It was not only do I have access to the classroom, but am I also included in what's going on in the classroom, okay? So in order for our special needs kids to be included in what we're doing, we have to adapt the environment, we have to adapt the method of instruction. We'll go back through these, so don't panic. We have to adapt the environment, we have to adapt the method of instruction, and we have to adapt the conditions. Okay, that's great. What does that mean? Right? If you're like me, you don't have a special education degree. Anyone have a special ed degree in here? No? Every once in a while there'll be somebody, maybe there's someone online, but I don't have a special ed degree. So special ed teachers are taught these things in college, right? We're not taught these things. I was not taught any of this in Bible college. So we're going to go through each one of these, and I'm going to have specific things to show you to give you just an idea, right? This is not exhaustive. We don't have time for that. But I'm going to run through some of these things fairly quickly and then give you some ideas of what that would actually look like in a classroom, okay? So the first one is adapting the environment. Adapting the environment. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the physical space of your classroom, okay? Now you may need to make some big adaptations in there if you were to have a child come all of a sudden in a wheelchair, right? And if you're crammed in there with chairs butting up next to each other, you may have to make some actual changes to the environment. But if you don't have an actually physically disabled person, these adaptations might look a little bit different. So if you've been to Fit Conference at all, you're not going to be surprised at this first one. Letter A on my paper, letter A says visual schedules. I think I'll say that in my sleep until the day I die. Visual schedules. Why? Why are visual schedules so important? Because if you have a child that is neurotypical, there are times, I'm going to just speak from my experience with my son, okay? I don't want to assume that I understand other people's children. But for my son, if he is having a day where he is particularly overwhelmed, logical thought doesn't always work. It breaks down, okay? So for him to have a visual schedule, I'm going to make sure they can see this online too. If we have a visual schedule, it just helps him stay regulated, right? Miss Cassandra and I laugh about this all the time because we'll get to here, and then we'll forget. We take them off as we do them, and then we'll forget, and the kids will be like, "You forgot to do the visual schedule." Yeah, I did. We'll tease each other about it. But I make a bunch of different ones of these. Will you hand me the other ones too? So the little squares. Yep. So the key about a visual schedule is that you try to make it as specific as possible, not generic, okay? So for example, some days we act out the story. So I have act out the story. Some days we have a puppet friend come in. Now, I will say, before you are like, what in the world? I'm going to show you how to make some of these later, okay? We're going to actually do a video. So sometimes we play a game. Sometimes we have an object lesson. Sometimes we have to clean up the room. So we make this as specific as possible, okay? Now, the funny thing is, AJ doesn't really need this so much anymore on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. But if he's having a rough day, it really does help if he can see the visual schedule and know what's coming. Also, sometimes you have kids, like AJ with autism, where they don't want to move from a preferred activity, okay? So maybe they really like the music and they are mad that you're going from music to a Bible verse, right? Oh, but look, nope, we're all done. We take it off, and we have a little box that's stuck up on our whiteboard that we drop them into. Nope, it's all done. We're finished. Now, is that going to work the first time? Probably not. But over time, with consistency and some of these other tools that we're going to talk about, it will work. It will help. Schools do this. Special ed classrooms live on this stuff. We're not making this up. We are copying the model that a special ed classroom will use. I have been in my son's special ed classroom. I've seen almost all of these types of visuals in his classroom. Okay, so we know they work. The science behind it works. The other thing that is important is to have visual rules. Visual rules. And I will say when we talk about rules, a couple of things. Number one, keep them simple, okay? If you look at these, they're just simple one word, okay? They're not like a huge like founding fathers document, you know? Okay? They're just simple. The other thing I want to talk about with our rules is if we're going to adapt the environment, our rules have to be something that our kiddos can actually attain, okay? You're setting yourself up for failure if your rule is sit in the chair and don't move. Your special needs kiddo is going to be on yellow or red every week because they're never going to obey that rule. And it's not because they're disobedient, it's because they cannot do what you're asking them to do. And we've talked about this in conferences before. We would never expect a blind child to read what we wrote on the board. That would be cruel. We would never expect a deaf child to listen to our lesson without an interpreter. We would never expect a child in a wheelchair to stand up in front of the class. That is cruel. But when we ask our special needs kids with autism, with ADHD, with the host of other fill in the blanks, when we ask them to do things that their body is not physically able to do, it is as cruel as asking a blind child to read the Bible verse. And we have to, that's like the basic foundation. Like we have to understand that. And when we understand that, then we see the need. Then we have the compassion and then we do the work, okay? Now, does that mean that my child, AJ, runs amok in class? No, because he can do these rules. This rule number one is eyes are looking. Now I say eyes are looking, not look at me, because kids with autism sometimes have a hard time making direct eye contact. So I want you looking in my general vicinity, right? I want you, basically what I'm saying really is pay attention, right? Look up here, okay? Ears are listening, self-explanatory. Now this one, we don't say be quiet. We say mouth is quiet because my son is a verbal stimmer. We have another little girl in our class who's a verbal stimmer, okay? If you don't know what stimming is, it's a repetitive behavior that a child on the autism spectrum, and I don't know, it may affect other disabilities too. I just speak about autism because it's what I know. But stimming is a repetitive behavior that helps a child self-regulate. You want them to self-regulate. If they don't self-regulate, you're going to have a problem. So if my son needs to make some kind of verbal stim or some kind of physical stim in order to self-regulate, I want to allow him the space to do that. So I'm not going to say, no noise. That's not fair. I do tell him, quiet mouth. So he might stim to himself like this. Whatever he's doing, right? We don't let him do the one I did earlier. Oh, because why? That's not a quiet mouth, right? Am I blowing your ears out there? Sorry. Our sound man just took his headphones off. Trust me, that's how our ears feel. Yeah. So, do you see what I'm saying though? Like you want the rule to be attainable, but that doesn't mean it's a free-for-all. He can make whatever noise he wants, okay? And also, if he is becoming particularly stimming verbally, I'll try and redirect the stim to a more tactile stim that's not verbal. So I might give him something to do with his hands, right? Something that he can make a repetitive motion with his hands. We've let him spin in the back of the classroom before. That's what he's needed to do, whatever, okay? We have all kinds of stuff back there. They have like little cushions that are bouncy. And so if he needs to move or stim somehow and the stim is disruptive to the classroom, we're going to try to replace it with one that is not disruptive to the classroom, but we're not going to tell him he can't stim, okay? Because we're not going to tell a blind child to read the Bible, okay? Calm body, that one kind of goes with stimming too. It also, because some stims can be destructive, and we're not going to get into all of that today, but calm body is better than be still, right? Because wiggling is okay in my classroom. You need to wiggle, you wiggle. But you're not getting off the chair and on the chair and around the chair and hanging upside down on the chair. We're going to keep a calm body. But in your bubble, if you need to move a little bit, I'm okay with that. This one's self-explanatory. Raise your hand before you speak. And then my favorite, be kind. Okay? So these are visual rules, and it's for the same reason that we want a visual schedule. We also number these. So our kids know them by number. So if I walk over to AJ and I just do this, he knows I'm telling him to obey rule 2. And I don't have to interrupt teaching, but he's obeying the rules. So that's why visual rules are important. It's for your benefit, right? It helps you maintain continuity in the classroom and to keep going while maintaining order, because you need to maintain order. Okay, I'm going too slow. The next one is to keep clutter to a minimum. Keep clutter to a minimum. If you are overly visually stimulating your classroom, it's hard for kiddos. I would also say the front of your classroom, like if you go into our room and you look, our bulletin board is at the back. And it's very cute. I like our bulletin board. But we want to keep it not overstimulating, okay? For some kids that have SPD, sensory processing disorder, a lot of visual stimulation is hurtful to them. It physically pains them. So we want to be considerate of that. Whatever we keep in front is usually like imperative. So our rules, our visual schedule, what we're using for the lesson, okay? We don't want to have all the artwork that the kids have colored for you on the walls behind you when you're teaching, okay? That's beautiful, but not where the kids' attention is going to be, okay? Because you don't want to distract them. Then have sensory items available. Have sensory items available. I didn't bring out our sensory stuff this time. I've brought it out before, but it kind of goes along with the verbal stimming. Something, if you go on Amazon and you search sensory items, you could scroll for hours. There's so many. Sometimes, though, a good one to have is like little egg timers, because, again, that could be another signal that when the egg timer runs out, we're going to put this away and we're going to come back and join class, right? So it's sensory. Then we're going to talk about visual memory verses. I have that one right here. Oh, well, let me go back to rules really quick. So we've talked about these before. If you've been here before, you already know that we use red, yellow, green lights. Each kid has a traffic light, and they get a verbal warning if they're breaking a rule. Next time they break the rule, they go on yellow. If they change their behavior, they go back onto green. Okay? Our goal as teachers is to always have them leave on green. Okay? But it's just a classroom management tool. But again, it's visual, right? And then this is AJ's. This is not, you can ask your parents to make this. You don't necessarily have to make it. AJ's my son, so I made this one. Today I am working for, and he'll make a choice when he gets to church on Sunday morning what reward he's working for. And if he leaves the class on green, he earns his reward, okay? But again, you don't have to do this for every kid in your class. But if you had a child that was having a particularly rough time with behavior, it might be something worth looking into. But then visual memory verses. This is the one that my husband was briefly talking about when we have our little girl who is nonverbal. We were talking about how she can't say her memory verse. And we want her to not just have access to the room, but we want her to be what? Included in everything we're doing. So I made, we do the same memory verse in Sunday school and junior church, and we do it for 3 weeks. So every 3 weeks, I make a new Bible memory verse visual. And these are Velcroed. So, and I'm going to make one of these on a video for you later so you can see it, okay? They're not hard to make. Once you do one and you know what you're doing, and then it's just basically you change out the pictures, okay? So she has one, we have one in the classroom, and then she has one that she takes home that her mom can practice the Bible verse with her at home, just like I would with my verbal kids. Hey, what's your Bible verse? Let's learn it. Let's practice it. We'd go over it at dinner. Let's memorize it so you can say it in church. So then when she comes to church, if we pull all these off, we give her the board, she puts them in order. AJ does this too. If he puts them in order, he said his memory verse, he gets the same reward as the other kids get. And it just means that he can be included. Now, AJ could actually memorize it now, but it helps him to have the visuals to put it in order. So that's a visual that it's, do you understand the difference between this and just a flashcard with a memory verse on it, right? That's a visual, but this is making it more inclusive for your kids that have speech delays or issues, okay? And then the last one there, no, there's two more, sorry. But the next one is visual prayer boards. This one I'm particularly proud of. I like this one a lot. Our son, AJ, has 2 cats, and he loves, that's not even a strong enough word. He loves his cats. I think he loves my cat, Callie, more than he loves his dad and I. He really loves his cat. And so in Sunday school and in junior church, every time we would take prayer requests, every week, AJ, who are you praying for? I want to pray for Callie and Toby. Every week. And it's adorable, right? Isn't that cute? Yeah, it's very cute. But I started thinking, why do we do prayer requests in Sunday school or junior church? To teach the kids how to pray, right? Is that why we do it? It should be, because we want to model praying in front of them so that they learn how to pray. We want to teach them that it's important to bring their prayer requests to the Lord. And that's why we do these things that we do. So I started thinking, and I'm like, okay, it's really cute that he prays for his cats every week, but as a teacher, am I actually teaching him how to pray? Because I don't just pray for the same thing all the time, right? I bring all my needs to the Lord. And so I told my husband, I was like, I'm going to make him a prayer choice board. And so I asked him, I said, apart from Callie and Toby, I want you to give me 5 other things that you could pray for. And so he gave me these. Now, if your student can't do that, with our other little girl, we asked her mom, what do you think are some things she would like to pray for? And her mom told us, and we did that. So I did pictures, because he said mom and dad, my daughter and son-in-law, my other daughter and her fiance, his sister Peyton, and then for school. So now this is the interesting part that he doesn't like very much. So the board looks like this. So he comes in on Sunday, tomorrow. What are you going to pray for in Sunday school? Callie, Toby. Okay, we're going to pray for Callie, Toby. And we put it up there. Now, at the end, it goes to the back. So now in junior church, Callie and Toby are not a choice. And he knows that, even though it makes him mad. So now he'll pick someone else, right? And then they go off on the back. And he has to pray for all of these before we can put the back onto the front, okay? So what is that? A couple of things about that. It's setting an expectation, right? Which helps reduce behaviors. I have a whole lesson on managing expectations on our website. You can, from a previous year, you can go back and watch that one. But it manages his expectations, and it tells him what my expectations are of him. That reduces behaviors, okay? But it's also teaching him, you can pray about a whole bunch of different things, right? And then what's really neat is, if, like for our other little girl, they were taking a really big trip. And so that was one of her little prayers on there. Well, the trips happened. They're back. So now we can say, look, God answered your prayer. And we can take it off the board, and then we put a new one on. Do you see how that is inclusive? It's including these kids that otherwise just may be left to sit there. And neither of them cause a problem during prayer time, so it really doesn't matter. No, it matters. Because I have to teach them how to pray. It's my job. And so it's important. Okay. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one, but the next one is be aware of food preferences. Be aware of food preferences. A lot of kids with special needs have food allergies, food intolerances, things that parents are trying to avoid. This is from my heart right here. Just don't do food. It's not necessary. Just don't do food. There are so many kids with so many allergies nowadays. We don't have to do food. And it's almost become a culture in our class. We had a situation once, a little while ago, where every single week there was some reason for a sheet cake in Sunday school. And I'm like, no, there's not. You don't need to feed kids a sheet cake at 10 o'clock in the morning, especially not when you're dealing with kids that have like behavioral issues and you're feeding them up on sugar, okay? I'm not necessarily telling you what to do in your church, but just think about it. Think about the end result if you're hyping kids up on sugar. Just be careful. Okay, point number 2. We need to adapt the method of instruction. The method of instruction. We want to keep our verbal teaching time short. Short. Maybe 15 minutes, maybe. Now, I said earlier, I was explaining this a little bit more, Miss Cassandra and I teach the same lesson in Sunday school and junior church. And that allows us to keep our teaching time short because we're hitting it both times, right? But if you're dealing with kids that have ADHD or autism, their attention span's about this big. You try to teach for 20 minutes of just you talking, you're losing control. Every minute you go past like 10, 12 minutes, you're losing control, especially if you're teaching with just a flashcard, right? And I love Abeka flashcards. I love flashcards in general. I love visuals. But if you're just standing there with a visual and you're telling your story, you got 10 minutes. And then those kids they're not even paying attention anymore. So why are we still talking, right? They're not paying attention. What I'm not saying is, I'm not saying don't make it important to teach. But there are lots of different ways we can teach. We don't have to just teach by standing up there telling a Bible story, okay? So here's some of the ideas that we have. Can you just hand me one of those spinny wheels? Okay, I use felt almost every week. This is the Betty Lukens felt kit. I feel like I should earn commission from them because I talk about it all the time. This is the small version, which if you have a small church and you don't have a lot of storage, it's a great option. They do make big, huge ones that would go on like a regular size, like easel board. But I love this one. Tomorrow our lesson is on the prodigal son. So I have 2 different scenes that I'll do with the kids. Even my neurotypical kids get excited about this. And we'll say things like, I won't have any of these people up tomorrow. I may not even have the house up. And I'll say, okay, what time of day do you think it is in our story today? Oh, it's daytime. Yes, how do you know it's daytime? Well, because the sun is out. Right, the sun is out. And I get them involved into the story, okay? And then, this is not the prodigal son, but I make some sort of manipulative for AJ every single week. Because if he has something in his hand to follow along with the story, he pays more attention. And I'm telling you, I probably could ask him, but I don't want to put him on the spot. If I brought him out here and showed him this, he could probably tell you the story because of the visual. But it keeps his hands, it keeps him engaged. I'll say, AJ, what picture are you on? What's happening next? And he'll be like, oh, and he'll try to describe the picture. Some of them have words on it, so he'll read the sentence. But it gets him involved and keeps his attention. They're also great tools for, like reinforcement afterwards. To be like, can you tell me about the story? And he'll go through each thing and he'll tell me. The other ones I do are, can I have the one on the D-ring? The flip board? Or just that one? I'll take that one, but yeah, that one. So this is another one. I don't do a wheel every week because he gets bored, right? So I'll alternate. These, I found all of these on Teacher Pay Teacher, all of them. And they're not expensive. We're talking $4 or $5 a week is what I spend on it. So here's the Good Samaritan, which we just did. So this one actually has the story on the bottom, so he can follow along. AJ cannot concentrate on just verbal. He has to have visual also. He's not just auditory. And so even at home, we have to have visuals. We have to have things in front of him to help him retain the information. If I just speak to him, he's not going to retain as much as if I show him and speak to him, okay? So this one, he'll follow along, he'll flip his book, and it helps keep him engaged in the story. This one is a little bit more in depth in the sense that as he goes through, he's supposed to put the correct image on the bottom. So this is more of a review. It can get kind of noisy if you do it during the lesson, but like afterwards as a review, you can be like, wait, find a picture of Nicodemus watching Jesus heal a man's hand, and he'll put that on as a review, usually when the other kids are doing like the craft time, because he doesn't really like that. But it's just another visual tool, and it's a great way to make sure that what has he actually got from the lesson, right? Did he learn anything? I want to know. Your teaching time shouldn't be more than 15 minutes. Reteach the lesson by doing multiple different activities. So we might do the felt board, and then I might have the kids act the story out. Or we might watch a little video about the story, or we might play a game related to the story, or I might let the kids retell the story with the felt. So I may be only teaching for 10 minutes or so, but we're taking up 20 minutes going over the story and over the story and over the story, but it's allowing the kids to move and be involved, so we're reducing behaviors, because that's really the goal here, is to reduce any behaviors and also make sure the kids are learning and retaining the information. Okay, letter B. Teach from the senses. Teach from all the senses. The more senses we can incorporate in our classroom, the better chance we have of our kids being involved and engaged and staying engaged. So here's just 3 examples of something that I have done in my classroom. We taught Nicodemus comes to Jesus by night. Well, it's nighttime. So I made my classroom dark. I put a blue tablecloth on the door because we have glass. And I put not real candles. Don't do real candles. I did battery operated candles all around my classroom. And then I played night sounds on my phone. And the kids were like, whoa. I was like, what time of day do you think it is? Oh, it's nighttime. Yeah, it's nighttime. We're going to talk about a man who came to Jesus at night. Why would we come to Jesus at nighttime? And then my kids that are a little bit older, oh, he didn't want anyone to see him. Oh, that's right. Do you see how immediately you've got your kids' attention, right? And this works with non-special ed kids. Wise man built on a rock versus the foolish man on the sand. I had a cookie sheet, and we had flour, and I made like a dam with blocks in the middle, and they made a house on one side with blocks, and the other they made on the hill of flour, and we poured water, and the house fell over. Okay? Oh, this was fun. I taught the lesson on the blind man who Jesus touched his eyes with clay and gave him his sight. So we made slime, because why not? And so I had a table, and we made slime because I said I wasn't about to let us play in the mud because I didn't think mommies and daddies would like that very much. So we made slime, and we talked about how it felt, and we talked about, and I made it, I added food coloring to it, and I added like food safe scents to it, and they got to smell it and touch it. And you tell me the kids won't remember that? Of course they're going to remember that. And AJ, it was all about it. And it's just another layer of teaching the story by getting them up out of their seats, getting them involved, getting them to be a part of the story of what's going on. Okay, teach with movement. Teach with movement. My kiddos love these little stick puppets. Aren't these cute? This one is, Jerry's his daughter. So after I told the story with my felt, the kids each got to take a little character and we acted out the story, okay? So I maybe only taught for 10 minutes, but then them retelling the story afterwards, I'm just teaching it again, right? And reiterating all those different truths that I want them to learn. I taught the story of Peter walking on the water, and I brought a tablecloth in, and my daughter, who's my helper, we had the kids walk and we made it like the ocean, and then they fell down because they weren't looking at Jesus, and then let them act out the story, right? The more we can get the body involved, the better it is, especially if you have kids with ADHD. Get them moving, get them using their movement for your purpose, because if you don't, they're going to use it for their purpose. So be deliberate in getting movement into your classroom. And then teach using lots of different visuals. Teach using lots of different visuals. We use a felt board. We use flashcards. Can I have those ones, baby? What I love about this too is, I don't know, I would like to get him on the ground floor of this, because whoever the artist is that drew these characters, every single creator on Teacher Pay Teacher uses exactly the same artwork. That person must be a millionaire by now. Man. And what I like about it is it doesn't seem to matter which store I go to. They do all have the same visuals, so there's a little bit of continuity from week to week, which is really cool, no matter who I buy from. But this is an example of flashcards. And then it might be that this flashcard story matches the one AJ's holding. So it's easy for him to keep up and see what's going on. Use visual storyboards, which I already showed you, visual story wheels, and then the clip art puppets, which I already showed you all of those. So just the more the merrier, right? Keep it interesting. And then we want to talk about adapting the conditions. Adapting the conditions. So what do I mean by conditions? This is a secular example, okay? If you're a teacher in the public school and you have a student with dyslexia, they would be given a special condition for exam time. It might be that everyone else in the class gets an hour, and a child with dyslexia maybe gets an hour and a half, okay? That's a condition that has been given to that child because of their special need. So it may be that in our classrooms, we need to provide similar conditions for our special needs kids. And so the one way that we can do that, we already talked about, is with how we word our rules, okay? We have to be careful. We don't want to look like we're playing favorites with our kids, right? But my kids in my classroom know that sometimes AJ needs something that they don't. And that's okay. And you know what that teaches them? To see the need and have compassion, right? Especially if I relay it that way, right? So it may be that AJ's having a particularly hard day. Well, I'm maybe not going to be as strict with him on the rule as I would be otherwise. And you want to be careful, right? I know my son. If he wasn't my son, it might be a little bit different. But we just want to be thinking about, am I just being a stickler, or am I actually trying to help the child in where they're at, what they need right now? Maybe they need a break, and you don't normally let kids leave your classroom. Well, that would be a condition. AJ leaves our classroom after Sunday school and before junior church. None of our other kids do, unless their parents come and take them to the bathroom or something. But we don't have a basement where the kids can go, so we have to keep them in there. But AJ, one of his conditions is that if he needs the break, he goes to his daddy's office and he gets a break, okay? It's an example of a condition. It may be that you have a kid that needs to go for a walk with their helper, and all the other kids are like, well, I'm going to go. You don't need to go. He needs to go, so we're going to make a condition for him to go. Memory verse would be another example of a condition, right? All the other kids have to verbally say their memory verse, but AJ and our other little girl, they get to use the board, okay? Prayer time is another example of how we made a condition for a special needs kid. Activity time is probably the one we would use the most, I would say. AJ hates coloring of any kind. He hates it. I am not going to give him a coloring sheet to do because I'm going to be shooting myself in the foot. He's going to get bored. So I give him an activity that's usually slightly different than the rest of the kids. Sometimes I'll make sheets for him with the memory verse and he writes it. Sometimes I'll have a paper with like the names of the people from the story and he'll write it. Sometimes I'll give him that, can you hold that one up? Yeah, sometimes I'll give him something like this where he is retelling the story, right? He's putting them in order, he's really retelling the story. He might do that at the table while the other kids are doing whatever the activity is we're doing, right? That would be called a condition, right? Allowance isn't really the right word, but because allowances aren't necessarily needed, but a condition is needed, right? So I give him that to do, but he's still included with all the other kids at the table, right? Teachers Pay Teachers have amazing adaptive resources for lesson activities. I probably should buy stock in Teacher Pay Teacher. And then here's some alternatives to craft time. I feel like sometimes we just like, oh, here's a coloring sheet, right? Here's a coloring sheet because my brain's tired now. I just want you to do something for the last 10 minutes of class. So here's some examples of some different things you can do. I didn't grab any of these. I'll grab some for later. I have done word searches before. And again, it's another great way to reinforce the story, right? As we're looking for so we just did Jairus' daughter. Who was Jairus? What was wrong? What did he need? As they're looking for the word, I'm still teaching the story. Lesson bingo is a fun one. And so I'll bring that out later. I don't have that. Visual storyboards are fun. You can also print a lot of these ones that I make for AJ. You can just print them and have your kids, as the activity, put the story in order and then color their own, storybook. A visual scavenger hunt is fun. We've done that. We did that at Easter. The kids loved that. That was fun. If you have a bigger room than ours, it would be a lot more fun. But you give a clue, and then the kids have to go find the visual that matches the clue. So, for example, at Easter time, we did Judas, too many J names. Judas got this for betraying Jesus. And the kids would be like, oh, silver coins! And they were running all around the room trying to find the picture that had the silver coins in it. So it's an absolutely great review, right? Because they have to know the lesson to be able to answer the question to then find the image. And it's a great review game because it allows for movement. And again, movement is so necessary. The letter F says, provide a break space if possible. I know that's not always possible. And it's not possible also if you're the only teacher, right? If you're the only person in the room, you can't leave the other kids to take a kid out, right? So maybe if you have a child that gets overstimulated in the room, you may have to, for a little while, have a second helper that's just for that little one that can give them the breaks that they need to then bring them back in. It may even have to be mom and dad for a little while, and that's okay. But it just means that church doesn't become something they dread, right? Because this is what will happen. Then the child will have more and more excessive behaviors every Sunday. And then mom and dad say, we can't come. And then that's how parents drop out of church. And then the divorce rate, I don't remember the statistic, but the divorce rate of special needs families is through the roof. And so they are not having community. They're not hearing the word of God. They're not being encouraged to be good spiritual parents. So it may be that if you have a child that's new or they're just having a really difficult time in the classroom, maybe mom or dad has to buddy with them for a little while. We've done it with our older girls before where they've buddied with their brother and they've taken him out and let him have a break and then go back into class. And now he doesn't need any of those things. And a lot of times that's what will happen. You're not necessarily setting up something for a lifetime. You're making an accommodation for a child in order to make coming to church possible for them. And as they do that, more and more they learn the tools that they need to be able to be in your classroom and to stay in that environment. I said this already, AJ goes to his dad's office between Sunday school and junior church. And again, none of the other kids are like, well, I want to go to pastor's office, because they know, oh no, AJ needs that. That's what AJ needs. And they're happy for him to have it, because that's an environment that we have fostered in our church. And that allows them some time for self-regulation, which is so important. Because the goal here is that the child learns to regulate their own emotions, right? The child learns to regulate their own behaviors, but we have to be, as the adults, the one that gives them the tools to be able to do that. Very, very quickly, I want to talk about a few other adaptions that would fit into any of these situations. The first one is adapting song time. Those of you who were here the last time we had lesson, I did a whole thing up here where I talked about rhythm sticks or something like that, where you can have a child involved in the song time. If you have a child that's nonverbal, they're not going to sing the song, right? So what can you do so that they feel included in the song time? Maybe they get to hold the visual. Maybe they clap. Maybe you learn sign language if they know sign language for a song, right? Think of some way to make an adaptation so that they feel included in song time. If your class is doing a performance in your church, our kids did, I think it was 4th of July, they did My Country 'Tis of Thee. AJ got to wave a flag. Our other child who's nonverbal, she wasn't here, she was on her trip. But we're singing again for our missions conference, and she can't sing, she's nonverbal. So we will give her something, a visual or something. We're singing Take Me Now, Lord Jesus, so a heart or something, I don't know. We'll give her something so that she can hold it up. And I always think of friends of ours who have a little, well, she's not a little girl, she's an adult now, who was bitten by a tick when she was young and ended up with Rocky Mountain spotted tick fever. I always put those words in the wrong order. And became severely disabled. Could not talk. Could not walk without assistance. Just so many things neurologically that happened to her because of having this illness. And I will never forget watching, I used to go to her church, watching the kids, all the kids in that church get up to sing for their patch program. And she got up there with her augmented speech device, and she would press. She would press the words while the kids were singing. That's inclusion. That was inclusion before inclusion was a thing, because this was a long time ago. That's inclusion. That little girl deserved to be up there with the rest of her class. She couldn't sing the songs, but she had her little walker with her little speech device. And I remember looking at that, and this was before I was married, before I had a special needs child. And I just remember that touching my heart so deeply, that church loved her so much. And they valued her so much that they figured out whatever it was they needed to do to get her up on that stage with the rest of the kids. And not just standing there, right? But actively participating in what the rest of the kids were doing. That is what we're trying to talk about today. What can we do so that that child feels included? We could talk about special outings that you may do, or whatever, whether you're taking field trips as school, but if you're taking like a kids activity or something, be thinking about your special needs kids. You don't want it to be that you're like, you get there and you're like, oh, I don't know how they're going to do this, right? Think about it before. We're having this activity. Can AJ be included? If he can't be included, what can I do so that he is included, right? And that will go a long, long way with your special needs parents too. They will feel very seen and heard if they know that you are going to make an effort so that their little one can be included in what you're doing, right? All right, that's it. Oh, yeah.
I think we'll do this because we just have a few minutes before we break for lunch. We have a longer question and answer session after lunch that just encompasses everything we've taught over. But there's a lot here. It kind of feels like drinking out of a fire hose probably to see all that we have here. And this is all doable. This is all things that you can do. but no doubt you have some questions. And so maybe just for the next 7 or 8 minutes, if you have a question directed to Diane about what you see here on the table or about manipulatives in general, why don't you go ahead and just raise your hand, and then we'll try to get it so that our mic's up top. We'll get for the people who are watching online. Does anybody have a question for Diane? Not everybody wants. Can't handle that. All right. Oh, there we go. Good.
Would you recommend being prepared and doing at least some basics before you have special needs children in your church?
I mean, you can. Basic things. Okay, so like visual schedule, sure, because you can use that no matter what. Visual rules, sure. I think all classrooms should have those. As an educator, I think all classrooms should have those anyway. So those kind of things, absolutely. Even like the reward system and all of that, yes. The other stuff, we have to be careful with some of it because it is kind of need specific. So you wouldn't want to go too crazy, right? And then the child that God brings to you you don't have what they need. But I mean, yeah, I mean, if your church has the budget and your pastor's okay with it and you want to start making visuals for your next year, praying that God will bring in a special needs kiddo, go for it. I think that's awesome.
And then just one additional thought is that I'm not certified, but I've worked with special education. I think a lot of the basics you can adapt to most children, like with schedules, and I think it helps with regulating those children as well in a basic, and it teaches them to kind of conform to rules and guidelines.
Yes, I agree, and I agree with that. Especially, a lot of us in here are from smaller churches where we don't have different classrooms for different ages, right? All of our kids are in the same classroom. So yeah, a visual schedule, visual rules, when you have a 4-year-old in there and a 10-year-old, that's awesome, right? Because the 10-year-old maybe doesn't need it, but the 4-year-old does. And it helps them to learn to self-regulate too, yeah. That's something I've learned as a special needs mom that I didn't necessarily learn when my older kids were little, was how much they need to learn self-regulation too. It's just not as obvious necessarily as it is with my son. But I know now with my youngest daughter, I'm much more aware of it, because I've seen how my son has needed that and how to help her with that too. Yeah. Anyone else?
What's the name of that? Teachers
Teachers pay teachers. Is it in the resource guide?
So yes, and on the last page, the next to last page of your booklet is a resource page, and it's going to name a lot of the things that we've talked about today so that you can go back. But if you are looking, and I said I'd let Diane talk, but I'm a normal preacher and I'm taking over again. But if you look at this and say, we're not making this up. We can't do that. I just want to remind you, we didn't do this either.
No.
This was bought and purchased on Teacher Pay Teachers.
That one
normally.
was
Oh,
not.
that's close.
That one is Royal Kids, which is
Okay.
also in the back.
Right.
Okay.
So, and that's
Yeah.
also in the back as well. But you're looking at cutting these. And listen, Diane goes the extra mile and laminates them. You don't have to laminate them unless you think about reusing them over and over again. Or if you're using them maybe 3 weeks in a row, you might want to laminate them. But even that's not necessary. And there's so much of this that does cover the spectrum, not just the spectrum of autism, but just spectrum in general. I'm thinking of Betty Lukens. It's so interesting that kids are so overstimulated. Most of these kids have iPads. Most of these kids have phones way too young. They are inundated with media. But I will tell you this, they are always so excited about a felt board. Because you can have an iPad, but you can't go, and move it around and all of that. And Betty Lukens, and this is where we both are on the same page with this as far as wanting to get maybe some kind of commission, but we're not affiliated with them at all. But this is the second set we bought in our ministry, the first in Florida. Where the books just give you the lessons, they tell you what to do, they give you a wonderful folder to be able to store them. In fact, if you want to look at our Betty Lukens folder, just please be careful, not taking things out. It's in the back, and you can look at those, and they're great for everything. One of our, I mentioned to someone earlier, the editor of our books I've worked with her all the way from when I was writing for religious columns for our town newspaper before the newspaper went belly up. And every time she's read one of our books, she said this: I don't have special needs children, she says, but almost everything you talk about is applicable to my neurotypical children. Because all of these are just basic principles, but at the same time, and this is where you have to be careful, not going too far ahead, because you don't know what specific adaptations you have to make until you know the diagnosis is in the room. And so some of these generally you can use. Betty Lukens works for anyone, but this may not be as helpful depending on the child specifically you have in your room. So a lot of really good stuff here, and I would say teacher pay teachers, Royal Kids. And again, being careful to understand that, and we say this on the back of the resource page, some of those are secular in the sense that teacher pay teachers is just teachers making things and selling them to other teachers. So we're not talking about doctrine, we're not talking about the King James Bible. You have to take care of those things on your own and use wisdom going through. And as I mentioned in our class previously with the gentleman, we continue to use the King James Bible with our children, despite the fact that it might be more difficult for them, but we're not going to change the Word of God to try to explain away what the children need to learn. We're just going to teach them through this, and what you're going to see at 1 o'clock with the video that Diane shows you, I think is really going to hammer home how you can do this yourself by just using the Bible and teaching children little bits at a time. I took over, I'm sorry. So anyway, we have time for one more question.
I want to check, is there any on the live stream?
We do
I will
not
say
have
while
one
he's
on the live
looking,
stream.
this is also a great way to have, like, our little girl that's nonverbal. Let's say we were doing a review question time. She's nonverbal. She can't answer a question. So we could say, I'm not going to use her name, but I'll use my own. Hey, Diane, can you bring me the picture where Jesus, wait, which one is this? Oh, Good Samaritan. Can you bring me the picture where the man helped the sick man? If she brings you the right question, the right picture, then you realize she was listening, right? And she understood. There's some understanding there. One thing that's really, really important if you have kids with speech delays or speech, any kind of communication problem, issue, or complete nonverbalism, you must assume competence. Just because a child cannot speak does not mean they are not intelligent. Just because my son is way more intelligent than his speech would indicate. You have to assume intelligence, and not just intelligence, but like that they can comprehend what you're saying. I tell a story about that in our book that I won't go into now, but how God showed that to me as a parent. Yes, your son understands what you're saying to him. Just because he can't talk to you doesn't mean he doesn't understand you. So don't assume that your little nonverbal child can't answer a question. Well, they're not understanding. You don't know that unless you try, find out.